Hi folks, it's me Michaela and welcome back to my channel. We are here for a reading wrap-up cozy edition on the couch today because Benjamin is having a nap in my reading chair in front of my bookshelves and I don't want to disturb him. And also it's cold, so I want to be bundled up in a blanket. It is blanket and giant sock season. It is wearing sweaters over my sweater season. It has just been constantly cold in Montreal lately and I was not built for this. But it is now 2026. Happy New Year, everybody. And that means that December is over. New Year has begun. And before I can really fully dive into 2026 and 2026 reading, I do need to come to a close with 2025 and talk about the last books that I read in 2025 and what I read in December. December wasn't a huge reading month for me. I was still kind of struggling with a bit of work stress and burnout feeling, and therefore fell into a lot of doom scrolling in December. But I did also do some reading. I finished reading 3 books in December. I had 2 fantasy books, 1 mystery book, 1 physical read that I owned, and then 2 of them were digital books that I loaned through Libby, and all 3 of these books were new to me. I did not have any rereads in December. I read a total of 1,262 pages in December, which averages out to about 421 pages per book and 41 pages a day. So I didn't do a ton of reading, but I did read some chunkier books. I also had an average rating of 3.5 in December. I had 2 very solid reads and 1 read that just was not it for me. So let's talk about those books so we can do a little bit more detail, shall we? So the first book that I read in December is the only physical read I had in that month. That was Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. I have been reading all of the Throne of Glass books in a series of reading vlogs. I've been having a lot of fun with it. I made my most recent one in December, so I've now read Queen of Shadows, and I ended up giving this 4 stars. If you want to hear very detailed thoughts that I had, you can check it out in the video. But overall, I feel the Throne of Glass series is very entertaining for me, and I have a very good reading experience, especially making the vlogs and just being really chatty and nitpicky and poking a bit of fun at it has been really just a fun experience for me, and it's really enhanced the reading experience of Throne of Glass, I think, versus if I was just reading it without talking about it in my chaotic vlog energy form that these books seem to always put me into. There's definitely things in here that I don't necessarily like, especially I infamously I feel at this point despise the witch POV in the Throne of Glass books. They finally became relevant, but barely halfway through this book, which is the 4th full book in the series, not including the prequel. So to be 5 books in and you're talking hundreds and hundreds of pages, and we only now have the witches actually making any sense, and it's the smallest bit of relevancy. I still don't think you need the witch POV. I have said before, and I'll say again, I would love to kind of run an experiment of just skipping anything that is a witch POV and seeing if you still understand everything that's happening in the books, because I personally kind of think you would. I don't think you're gaining any new information other than one thing in this book from the witch POV that I can think of. And I just find that having that POV also just harms the rest of the POVs for me, because it slows down the pacing and it splits the story. There's also just some things in these books that don't necessarily make sense. Selena's a little bit of a can do no wrong protagonist. She's the best at everything. She can outplan everybody. Everything eventually ends up working in her favor. There's a little bit of magic doing something that we've never been told magic can do all of a sudden in this book, which is also kind of a pet peeve in fantasy for me, is characters getting out of a tough situation because magic can now all of a sudden do something that has never been established before in the magic system. What else? There's also just a whole silly thing where there's a lot of trying to hide and be undercover in this book, and they don't really do much to accomplish that other than when they're outside they put on a hood. So apparently all of these really wanted, well-known people put a hood on and then like disappear. I guess like nobody can recognize you if you have a hood on in this world, which I just like find silly and funny. There's like things like that I find funny. I find like doesn't make a lot of sense. I like to poke fun at, but they don't like necessarily affect my rating of the book overall, because what I'm expecting from Throne of Glass is like a fun, entertaining fantasy story and not necessarily like a super complicated, best built world building political fantasy. Like I'm not expecting that from this book. So therefore, when it doesn't give me that, I'm not disappointed and it doesn't affect my rating of it. I hope that like makes sense. Like I like to rate my books off of the experience I had reading them from what I expected the experience to be. So like if I think a book has been like marketed to me as, I know, like a good example of this is Liz Moore, God of the Woods, is it? Where I went into that thinking it was a thriller. I felt like it was marketed to me as being a thriller. So then when I was reading it, and it was much more like literary and commentary on society in that time and like being a woman in that time period, I was like very disappointed with the reading experience because I didn't feel like that was what was portrayed to me as what my reading experience was going to be. So it's not necessarily that the book was bad, but I felt like I was misled going into the book. I hope that makes sense, but that's like kind of how I do my ratings. So my second book that I read in December, I actually read this in one day on Boxing Day, and it was Everyone This Christmas Has a Secret by Benjamin Stevenson. I ended up giving this 4 stars. This is like the third book, kind of like book 2.5, because I don't think it's like necessary reading in the series of the Ernest Cunningham series by Benjamin Stevenson. I really enjoy this like mystery styled writing that Benjamin Stevenson has. This is the Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone book series. It was a 5-star read for me when I read the first book, and I really enjoyed the second book, Everyone on This Train Is a Suspect, but didn't necessarily like love it the same as the first book. And this was kind of like a Christmas special, and it was fun. It was like very festive. It was fun and funny and like a light mystery, but like it's still a good read. It wasn't too long. It's like under 200 pages. It's kind of more novella than novel, and I thought like did a really good job of like kind of like poking fun at the like rules of a Christmas special. There's a lot of like breaking the fourth wall in these Ernest Cunningham books that I find really fun and really enjoyable. So it was just like a really fun read. I'm really glad that I was at the point where I felt like I could read the Christmas special, because I read the first and the second books already. So, and it was Christmas time. It felt like the right thing to do, and I think it was the right thing to do. I felt like it was a very successful Christmas time read. And then the final book that I read in December was The Dark Prophecy by Riordan. This is the second book in the Trials of Apollo, which is kind of a series within the Percy Jackson universe. And I ended up giving this a 2.5. I actually started this, I think, like near the end of November, and I didn't finish it until the end of December. And it just took me like a really long time to read and finish it, because I never felt like I cared about the book. I don't know if maybe because I was partially like I was reading it in such small bites that it felt like it was dragging plot wise, but it did feel like it was taking a really long time to do a whole lot of nothing in this book. And I felt like the Apollo character had very little growth from the first book. So in the first book, when Apollo was being very godlike Apollo, despite being in the mortal body of a 16-year-old boy, it was like funny and lighthearted because it was all set up and it just started. Now when you're like in the second book and it's like it's still a lot of that, it kind of got to be like a bit too much. It was like no longer funny at this point. It felt like it was like hindering my reading experience to just have him be like, well, I'm Apollo, I'm amazing, I don't understand why nobody is bowing down to me, or whatever it was, like it just like wasn't clicking with me as like humorous anymore. I think like maybe it was probably just like not the right time for me to read this book. I think if I read it when I was in a different mood, or just at a different time in my reading, maybe when I wasn't struggling so much with staying connected to books while I was reading, because December in general was like a hard reading month for me, that maybe like it wouldn't have been a 2.5. But I really just like could not get into this book. And even like the ending, when like, we're at like the climax and like big fights and things are like happening and moving forward, we're getting things that are propelling us into the third book. I was just still like didn't care that much, and it was like weird because I was like, you think at least here I would be like, oh yeah, let's get to the end. But like it was the middle of like a huge fight, and I fully was just like, I could put this book down right now. I just like didn't care about it that much, and it kind of like overall I really like Rick Riordan books, and the ones I've read so far, I read, of course, like the Percy Jackson series, and then the one after that is it the Heroes of Olympus? But like I read both of those series, so then I was kind of looking forward to reading like the next Percy Jackson universe series because I've been enjoying them so far, and this one kind of just felt like a little bit of a flop for me. I think I'm gonna still finish the Trials of Apollo series, but I think I'm gonna wait until I'm really in the mood for this type of book, this like kind of younger YA comedy, Greek mythology, Percy Jackson universe novel. You know, I think I'm going to wait until I'm really in the mood for that vibe specifically to read the next book, because I don't think this is a series I can read and enjoy unless it's like I'm really in the mood for it. So those were the 3 books that I read in December. I did also start some rereads in December, but I didn't finish any of them, so they're not in my December wrap up. One of them is I did start my final critical reread of Harry Potter. I'm on the last book now. Started my reread of Deathly Hallows. I'm a little over halfway through, so I'm waiting to finish that, and then I'll be done that critical reread of my childhood books that I've been slowly working on. I don't really talk about it other than to say like when I read one, but that's it. I also started a reread of Quicksilver by Callie Hart. I read this in the first half of 2025, and the new book Brimstone released in November, so I wanted to do a reread of Quicksilver physically since I did buy myself the physical book. When I first read it, I did read it digitally. I bought the physical copy. I wanted to reread this physically before I read Brimstone, so I've been working on that, but I didn't finish either of these books in December like I kind of thought I might, but you know, you live, you learn, you read, you don't. 'Tis life. So yeah, that's my December reading wrap up. I will be getting into some 2026 reading plans and goals and things soon, and kind of see where I want to go for this new year reading wise, but that's kind of all I have to say today. If you happen to like the video, make sure to give it a like, a little thumbs up. Happen to like me, consider subscribing. I'd be happy to have you. Let me know down below how your December reading went. How did you finish off the year with your reading? Super strong or like very kind of weak like me? Did you love your 2025 reading year? Are you trying to stay the same course for 2026 or totally switch it up? If you have any thoughts on the books that I read in December, let me know. And with that, I hope you're having a wonderful day today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.